All right, coaches, welcome. Second session of the day today. Pumped, man. This Coach Lonergan's been on my bucket list for a long time. Heard him speak many a time. One day we will get you over to Canada. We'll make that long flight and we'll do it right. The guy's got a resume as long as I am tall, and we've picked shooting for him to discuss today. He's going to do that in a 4-phase approach. So, Coach, appreciate you being on. Appreciate the time difference and everything that you did to get prepared for this one. And we'll give you the floor here. So take it away.
Thanks, Tanner, and thanks for all the terrific work that you do in supporting coaches and this great concept through Golden Ticket Sports. Always great to share the game, and I certainly have got a strong respect for all things basketball in Canada. A lot of close friends over there, so great to spend some time with you and the coaches. As Tanner said, you were going to talk about shooting, and we're going to do it from a 4-phase approach. I think shooting is the master skill. It's if you can't shoot in the modern game, you can't play. We in times gone by, you could have that elite screener and elite passer and the I guess what we would call the garbage guy that does all the little things, and that's still really important. But you need to be able to shoot the ball, or at least be a threat to shoot the ball, particularly the way modern offense is played. We spend a disproportionate amount of time in our programs on shooting. I'm a firm believer that at the youth level, a third of your total practice time should be devoted to shooting, whether that's finishing, adaptive shooting, form shooting, or using this 4-phase approach that we're going to talk to today. It's just such an important skill. And I always encourage coaches to embark on and stay on a journey of discovery about shooting. You can never be a good enough teacher of shooting. And that's the ultimate thing that you can provide your players. If you can improve their shooting consistency, their repeatability, their self-coachability, their accuracy, their range, you've done a great job as a coach. Some ways to do that. How do you get better teaching shooting? Well, you got to watch great shooters and see what their commonality is. We're fortunate now in the game to have some really elite shooters. Obviously Steph Curry and Klay Thompson come to mind in terms of how well they shoot the ball. But whether that's NBA, WNBA, high-level collegiate basketball, EuroLeague, or other pro basketball, we've never had the quality of shooters that we have now in the modern game. So, if you want to learn from someone, learn from a master. Watch them, see what the common points are, and blend that into your overall philosophy. We're big on asking questions of players and engaging in what we call guided discovery. And again, while we said we want to learn from the Klay Thompsons, the Steph Currys, the Diana Taurasi's of this world, we also want to learn from our players. And just by asking them questions, particularly in an individual small group workout, what would you do in this situation as a player to get your shot off? How do you approach shooting? What resonates with you as an athlete, as a player, in regards to shooting? And they'll tell you the truth because they want to win and they want to get better. And so anytime you can engage them and get data from them, it's really valuable for you as a coach, particularly as a youth coach. Invest learning time in shooting before system. And what I mean by that is, if there's a choice between practicing that 4th out of bounds play or that, 5th special situation, late clock play, or getting some shots up in a worthwhile environment, there's no choice. You've got to invest time in shooting practice. You've got to invest time in shooting, in reviewing that from games and practice. You've got to review and learn and develop your package in terms of teaching and drilling shooting, right? And we know from all levels that history's shown that shooting's the great equalizer. If you watch the NCAA tournament, you see consistently, the Cinderella stories that where a small school beats a Power 5 school because they can shoot the three, because they've been able to step in consistently and knock down shots. So, it's particularly if you're a coach at a smaller program, maybe less athletic kids, maybe a smaller group of players to choose from, shooting should be your God that you pray to every day. It's got that opportunity to be a great equalizer for you and your program. So what do we mean by the 4 phases in developing shooting? Well, for years, we've spoken about form, repetition, and situational. So can we get them really sound in their technique? Can they repeat that technique? And can they self-coach? Can they self-correct? And we'll talk about all these things as we move forward. Repetition is an obvious one. Consistently, we talk about see the ball go through the net. The power of that visualization, just seeing the ball consistently go through the net, building success through success, really important. And then situational, so things that are going to happen in a game. And we know now from a lot of research and coach development that we have to practice more things that actually happen in a game. So shooting off movement, shooting off cuts, shooting off screens, shooting in transition, things that actually we want to happen in a game, we better make sure that we're practicing. The 4th element, or in this list, it's the first, but the other element that we've added in recent times is kinetics. So, while we talk about form and repetition, situational, what are the young players doing with their body? How do they move? How do they create energy? How do they create the shooting motion consistently? We had a great influence from the elite athletes program in Belgium, where they spend a lot of time linking the kinetic chain and what people are doing with their body with basketball skills. And after spending some time there and then doing some research, we added this element that we used to have 3 phases. Now we certainly spend a lot of time on linking how the body moves and how it links with the rest of the developing shooting. So what does that mean? Well, the shooting action, doesn't matter what player that you watch, who your favorite shooter of all time is, it's a fluid action, and it's all about linking the kinetic chain. So creating energy off the floor, through the body to that fine motor skill at the end where we want to release and follow through. Right? And too often we don't give young athletes the tools physically. We don't give them the anatomic references that they need to succeed. And often we can make shooting very rigid and confusing by giving too much information about where our elbow is, where our hand is, where our knee, and it becomes a very convoluted, confusing, rigid environment for young athletes, where we're trying to create the exact opposite. We want a dynamic, fluid approach where athletes can just create really positive energy through their kinetic chain to the ball, to the basket. We are now spending a lot of time on this area, and with good results of players of all ages, down to 9 and 10-year-olds right through to our elite players. So it's important for young players to understand the energy systems involved in shooting. You need to talk to them, you need to show them, you need to do drills and warm-up activities, strength and conditioning activities that really give them a strong understanding of that creation of energy off the floor, not through the floor, to the ball, and that fine motor skill at the end. we try and teach it initially, of course, without the make or miss element. If you're trying to impact, young players and how they move, if you've got the make or miss element at the end, they're not going to buy in as much. Get them to move naturally, get them to develop a real confidence with that creation of energy off the floor, without the stress of the basketball, without that competitive element of, I have to make this shot. Can they move, without the ball and execute what you want them to do through their kinetic chain first, and then we add the ball. If you look at, the great JJ Redick, his ability to shoot, as he's been able to make his way through a 17-year pro career, the key thing's been his body. He's done a great job with his body. He's done a great job with what we call shooting agility, and spends a lot of time, just moving and rehearsing those movements rather than just standing there getting 500, 600, 700 makes up as we did in the past. So maybe as one point, sacrifice that. We're always talking about we need to get makes, we've got to get shots up, we've got to get our 300 up, we've got to get our 500 up. Maybe take that down and devote a little bit of that just to developing that body movement mechanics and that really fluid kinetic chain. We speak about our foot pattern consistently. We ask the players, what's your natural foot pattern? What would you do with your foot pattern in this environment? And if it's sound, we build on that rather than correct all the time. We want flexibility through the hips, and you can only do that through worthwhile strength and conditioning, worthwhile Pilates, flexibility and agility practice away from basketball. As much as we can, particularly if we're going to spend a lot of time shooting in a practice, we want shooting functional movement in the warm-up. So we want, as the athletes warm up, rather than just run in straight lines and do high knees and do karaoke and all those things that they do, can you include an element of cutting and inside footwork, flare footwork, curl footwork, just the body movements that they're going to do? They're still achieving what you want them to achieve. They're getting warm, they're getting the blood flow up, but they're also getting some more rehearsal about developing that kinetic chain through the jump shot. And I think this is a big one, and this is what the elite programs do. You need to talk to your strength staff. If you're fortunate enough to have a strength staff or an S&C coach in your environment, or players are working out with an athletic trainer, talk to them about this area. Shooting's the master skill. We've spoken about that. Shooting's an area we want to impact as much as we can. Well, it takes a village to raise a shooter. So, in the gym, I'm not going to tell those experts what to do, but I am going to engage them in conversation and say, hey, this is what we're trying to achieve to improve our shooters. How can you help? And we've seen great results with that by just engaging in that conversation. So the next phase is form or technique, whatever you want to call it. Really important. Form needs to be linked to the shooting action, not isolated from the shooting action. We don't spend a lot of time with the traditional one-hand shooting action. While we want to isolate the parts and make sure that we're working on, we don't want to separate them. I think too often what we do in the form shooting session is turn players into robots. We can't say on one hand that we want a fluid action, right? And we want to create energy off the floor and then spend every practice part thereof making it a very mechanical, methodical approach. It's counterintuitive to what you want to do. So in the form, you certainly want to teach the parts. the grip on the ball, hand positioning, the set point, stance, energy system, all those things. But as much as you can, to our point about fluid action, try and link them rather than separate them. I think one of the biggest errors in teaching shooting is in form, where we don't incorporate any rhythm. Again, it's too mechanical, and shooting's not a mechanical action. So, we're really big on creating energy off the floor, making sure that the shot's dynamic, even in that controlled form environment. So be a bit creative, challenge yourself to be a more intuitive coach and teacher of the skill, and vary your form shooting. In a previous program, we would chart form shooting. And the reason we did that is we just felt the players didn't engage in it very well, and we didn't think they valued the form shooting. So we didn't tell them, but we charted it over 3 weeks. We'd do our 8 minutes of form shooting every day. And pretty decent players were averaging, shooting 60% in the form. You think, well, 60% is not bad. That was 60% in form shooting, 1-2 meters from the basket. And it wasn't a skill error, it was a value error. They were bored senseless that we would put 8 minutes on the clock and we would go through the old collegiate style, one hand, then add the guide hand, now get a knee. It was boring. And no one learns when it's not stimulating, let alone youth basketball players or even senior pro basketball players. So make sure that it's not mechanic and it's not boring. You need to be a bit creative. Incorporate some balance. We spend a lot of time with that. That again links to the kinetics. So a balanced shooter is going to be a good shooter. And remember, this form shooting doesn't have to be just 1 meter from the basket. Yes, we all value that, getting makes, seeing the ball going through the net, demanding all swishes, all those things, to the great Rick Pitino line. He wants all shots, all net, all the time. And it speaks to focus. But, very rarely do we shoot a jump shot 1 meter from the basket. In fact, if you watch 5 games and you would be lucky to see 2 jump shots 1 meter from the basket. Why are we spending 6-8 minutes a day, practicing that? So while we don't want them out there blasting from 3, we certainly want to, move around so they're 2 to 3 meters from the basket, while you can still control and isolate those elements, but it's a more realistic game-like environment. Repetition. This is the one area that coaches, do well traditionally. Everyone understands the need to get a lot of shots up and to shoot in volume, and it certainly still has merit. But one thing that we're learning through, better teaching methodology and better understanding of how people learn, how people develop, is simply getting a volume of shots up is not enough, and often it can be counterintuitive. So the repetition phase should be more than just simply getting makes. You want to still make sure you're balancing the technique and correction with that volume. It's no good working through the phases, getting to repetition, rolling the balls out, and allowing mistakes to be practiced consistently, and you not having an impact and making sure that you're coaching in sound bites and helping the players. One of our really experienced coaches and one of the great teachers of the game in the Australian coaching ranks, Bill Tomlinson, speaks about limiting his players. He coaches at a university program in China, limit their time on the shooting gun. The Dr. Dish and those machines. He said they're great, but he limits their players to 10 or 15 minutes on those, rather than get on there for 40 minutes, get your 600 makes, but it really, it's not a great use of time because it's not specific enough. It's not game-like enough. So it's a really great point. We can get caught in, let's just get 500 up. We need value in everything we do. We want to define the natural foot pattern in the repetition. Consistently ask your players, what would you do with your feet in this situation? So, some shooters love to step in, the traditional 1-2 step in. Some prefer to hop. Some will have a preference on going left foot, right foot, which we call power foot environment here. Some are really into the inside foot, so they want to run a curl route. Other players, even on a curl route, they want to get their left foot down, right? So, as I said previously, as long as it's sound, I'm going to extrapolate that with the players. If I don't think it's sound, if I don't think it's something that's going to help them, I'm going to say that. But if I see that they've given it thought, I see them do it, and I see it's got some merit, well, we're just going to work and layer and build on that. I think that term natural foot pattern is really, really important. I think at times, and I know I've been guilty of it, we define, no, your footwork has to be this. On this cut, it has to be this. I'm not sure that's the game, and I'm not sure that's really how you get the best out of athletes. Certainly not saying that athletes rule the roost, but they're the ones that are going to have to perform this pretty complex skill at a high level of pressure against high level athletes. I'm going to make sure they're part of the solution. Touched on limit time on shooting machines, and primarily because shooting's about movement, but it's about relationship, with the pass or the dribble. So if I stand there 500 times and the ball comes directly to my hands from a machine, that's not realistic. Even the elite passes, it's going to be at my shoulder, or maybe it's going to be, at my waist. So just make sure that you vary. If you've got those shooting guns, fantastic. They're a great tool, but that's what they are, a tool. And I think it's really, really important that you strike that balance. In repetition, often we chart scores. So we keep statistics, makes and misses, and we do it over a season, and we know what, little Johnny shot, over the last 6 weeks. And that's really important. And we live in a data-driven society, but don't get married to that. I think that sometimes we can put too much emphasis on that data, because really the only shots that matter are the ones in games. So, I'm not too much in love with an athlete who shoots 72% in our form drills and our repetition drills and in his individual workouts, and then shoots 30% in the game. There's got to be a correlation. So I think striking a balance between keeping that data and charting different scores, it's got to be in context. The last thing I would say on repetition is, rather than just say, right, we're going to have this window of time in our practice, 10, 12, 15 minutes, we're going to, shoot, we're going to do all our volume drills. Vary it up a little bit. Start with some shooting, mid-practice, throw in another repetition type drill. And of course, the value of doing it late when there's fatigue. I think multiple short blocks in this phase is important. If you read about or do any research with people like Chip England, the great shooting coach, your own Dave Love, they do things in 20-minute blocks, in individual workouts. They're not going to do an hour of shooting. They're going to really make sure that they lock into some specifics, rather than just, again, that mentality, let's get 500 up and go. It's about quality, certainly not quantity. Situational. This is modern coaching, isn't it? practicing things that happen in a game. Linking practice more closely with the game. In Australia, we call that game sense or a games approach. I know that from colleagues in Canada, including the great Mike McKay, that this is a big part of your coaching ethos as well. It's something that perhaps doesn't always link in shooting. We get so caught up in the repetition that we forget that we've got to link it to what's going to happen in a game of basketball. So, as we spoke about, shooting off cuts, shooting in an environment where there's movement, and in the World Cup in 2019, the Men's World Cup, one of our terrific young assistants here at the Centre of Excellence, Michael Cassidy, did an analysis of where the shots come from. And over 55% of all shots in the World Cup came from at least 2 meters of movement by the shooter prior to the catch. So think about that. More than half the shots in that tournament, which was an unbelievably high-level tournament, came from where the receiver, the shooter, had moved minimum 2 meters before they've gone into the shot. So that really impacted the way we here in Australia practice shooting. If the data's saying this, we better be practicing that, right? So I think we've spent a lot more time in this situational environment in the last 18 months, excluding COVID, unfortunately, but because we realize we want to practice what happens in a game, and we want to provide players with a tool that happens in a game. Use of adaptive shooting drills. Some people call them contested shooting drills. I don't ever want to do a contested shooting drill. And maybe I'm a dinosaur, but offensively, all we want to do is create open shots. We don't want to shoot contested shots. So I'm not going to roll out a drill that's a contested shooting drill, but we do have to have a drill where there's game-like environments, i.e. defense, where there's situation of advantage or disadvantage. You can't simply shoot on air and be a consistent shooter. It's really, really important that you have that adaptive shooting where there's impact on time and space. Our game's all about time and space. So if our offensive game's all about time and space, we want to practice skills in an environment where time and space is impacted. Linked to shooting is shot selection, decision making. We speak a lot about decision making, and we do a lot of really terrific game sense, game approach drills on decision making. Well, shot selection is the ultimate decision on the floor. Shot, pass, drive is still the foundational decision on what we want to do. So make sure that you don't just preach shot selection, you teach shot selection. There's a difference. You consistently hear this, we've got to get better shots. Hey, we're taking bad shots. Well, firstly, what does that mean to the players? And what have you done in your practice to impact that? I think that's a really, really important element as well. Foot pattern and preparation specific to areas of the floor. Corner threes is a big one. How often do players step out of bounds on the corner three now, or they travel as they're trying to get into it? So more than ever, you need to define and help players explore and develop footwork in certain areas of the floor. The old days where you could step into every three-point shot, it's not possible now. You start stepping into that corner three and the big 1-2, it's just not going to work. Again, we spoke about the ability to make shots on the move, and you got to teach and drill accordingly. The better the athletes, the higher standard, the less open shots you're going to get. So if you're going to expect players to make shots in that environment, really important that you're practicing it and you're doing drills that then enhance it. Adaptive foot pattern, we spoke a little bit about that, but if I'm brain dumping the foot pattern and the footwork that an elite shooter has to be able to do, first one's curl. That's a staple for any shooter. Can you get off that inside foot and get into your shot? Flare's becoming even more popular now and important. Fade, the corner fade is really important. Can you get your feet underneath you quickly? The turnout, so floppy action, and I'll show you a video here of perhaps our most elite shooter in Australia here in a sec. And the other thing is transition. We're shooting a lot more jump shots in transition. Are we practicing that, or are we just preaching the tactic, drilling the tactic, but not giving the specific situational teaching so players can have some success in that environment? The picture there's of Chris Goulding, who was in our World Cup teams, been part of our national team for a decade and is our elite shooter in our pro league here. And I just thought I'd show you a quick clip of that. I hope it comes out okay in the Zoom, Tanner. I think Chris embodies this 4-phase approach. I think he's got great kinetic chain through his shot. He's got a really strong technique. He moves without the ball, and he's committed to getting a lot of shots up in practice. So I'll just share this. It's only a small video, and then we'll wrap it up from there. I'm sorry about that. I'm having some problem with the share. It's saying it won't allow me to share. So I'll send that video through to Tanner, and he can share it with you all. My apologies for that. My technology skills.
No worries. Yeah, no worries, Lana. We'll post it here with the replay as well.
So that's my presentation, and again, just wanted to say thank you to Tanner and Golden Ticket Sports. I love to share the game. I'd encourage Tanner to send that presentation out to all the registered coaches, and Tanner also share my social media stuff and email, and more than happy to engage in the coaches any way I can.
Perfect, Coach. Awesome. Really, really appreciate you doing this. I'll fire off with a question just to get things going. So I know one of the things, especially with high school coaches or coaches in that kind of grade 8 to 12 range, you always are asking your players, oh, can you get in the gym and get more shots up, right? Can you get in there and work on it in your own time? How much of that for you, coach, is scripted, and how much of that is player led, or what, are you giving guys a plan to get into the gym? I guess, what are your thoughts?
Well, like most things, coach, it starts with questions. Okay, coach, they come in and say, Coach, I want to get in the gym. Can I get a key? Can I come in at this time? And usually the answer is going to be yes. But then my question is, what are you planning to do? What are you going to do? And often the answer is, we're going to get shots up.
I want to learn from players as much as I want to learn from great coaches. So they're constantly thinking, they got to make decisions, they got to help each other out, they got to work on damage spacing. I'm influencing the ball with what hip I want it to go to. All right, so it doesn't matter what way. So you shift the ball, I've got a hand here, keep shifting the ball 5 times. So I'm going to jab. So if they jab. All right, before I start, I'd like to
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. Finally,
No worries. It was working now. Yeah. No worries. Yeah. Sorry.
Huge apologies. Yeah, that's I'm going to get shots up. Okay, what does that mean? What's that look like? What sort of shots you're going to, and not to make it interrogation, but I want them to have a plan. Adam Caporn is our coach here at the Centre of Excellence, and he talks about having a simple plan for shooting. And so if I don't think players have got a simple plan, I'll make suggestions and say, hey, why don't you get this? Why don't you look at this? I notice you need this. But if they, if I think they've got a simple plan and they can verbalize that simple plan, I'm going to allow them to drive it themselves.
Sure. And then the follow-up to that, coach, is how much of that time allocated to shooting here on an individual level is based on increasing players' strengths or working on players' weaknesses? Is there a balance? Do you find that there's a certain way to go about that?
Yeah, I think you probably want as 1 as to 3 on that. So, if you've identified a weakness, that would be the 1. And working on the strengths would be the 3, because that's what players want to do. You need to trick them a little bit. If I say, hey, you need to work on this, and this, they're probably not going to do that, but hey, make sure you get this, remember we spoke about this specific thing on that flare footwork. Be great if you could get some stuff on that. But hey, we know that you're getting close with that transition 3, so keep building on that. And so I'd go 1 as to 3. I think sometimes we can get guilty of saying to players, oh, you need to do this, and this is an area of weakness, and you need to do this, and you need to do this, and they don't want to hear that,
Right.
And so I think you've got to balance it 1 as to 3.
Sure. Okay, we got questions coming in from our attendees here. So, what are your thoughts on the mid-range game at the youth level?
It's a big bone of contention here in Australia. We've had a lot of coaches, follow the analytics and follow the NBA game and say the mid-range is dead. But I'm not one of those guys. I guess I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I think it's important. We just had our under-18 national championships, and the best offensive player there, young man by the name of Rory Hawke, dominated in the mid game. He consistently hit big pull-ups. I think it's important. For years we've taught, far, mid, close. Can you shoot the 3? Have you got something in between? And then can you finish around the basket? I don't know why we would take a whole element out, because some nerd at MIT said it's not a good shot. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Next one here. So you mentioned 1/3 of practice time should be shooting at youth levels. What does that breakdown look like at a higher level with the college and pro, in your opinion?
Well, at the college and pro, they can get their shots outside of practice. You've got assistants, and you can get in San Antonio, they call it their vitamins. They can get their vitamins every day by getting their shots and they're finishing up. But I certainly wouldn't, as they go up, just hand it back to the players. I think players like shooting, and they like shooting in practice. So youth level, definitely a 1/3. I don't think pro coaches and even high level college coaches shoot the ball enough in practice. I think it's a bit of a cop out. I hear coaches say, "Oh, that's on the players. They've got to find." Well, you're the coach. You're the leader of that. You're trying to manage that performance. So, I'd probably still be doing 20% of total practice time, even at that level, if I had that chance.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Next one here. So with the national team, do you utilize any sort of competitive shooting ladder or anything like that? And if so, is there a process for moving up and down that ladder?
No, not so much, because obviously in that environment, it's camp based and players are all over the world. They certainly, all our national teams chart, their shooting, and there wouldn't be a shooting drill that doesn't have time, score, or target, TST. And I was at one of our national team camps with our senior women recently, and Sandy Brondello, the great coach of our national team, but also of the Phoenix Mercury. She starts every practice with adaptive shooting. So it shots off their sets. It's multiple basketballs. Big one for her is the coaches as passes. They got coaches, managers, physios out there, rebound, just so the players can just focus on getting a lot of shots up. But yeah, they certainly track it, but it's a different environment, I guess, than the day-to-day, weekly grind of the pro or college game.
Right. Okay. So transitioning as shooting into finishing here. So finishing skills at the youth level, what is important to teach first and next and so on? Like would it be similar to what you outlined for shooting today, Pete?
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I think you've got to teach what you want them to do with their body. Obviously footwork. Most young players around the basket, if they miss, it's because of their feet or their eyes. So you've got to be able to link those two. So what are they doing with their feet? Can they pivot? That was one of the things we identified last week at our national junior championship. Is finishing was just impacted by the lack of creating an open window through the pivot. But yeah, so what are you doing with your body? What are you doing with your feet? You've got to constantly coach the eyes on offense. What do they see? You've got to see what they see. You've got to ask what they see. You got to identify what they're looking at, because that's where finishing, is such an issue. But I think too, adaptive. Like the mic and drill. I did a couple of workouts last week with one of our national team players, and we started both sessions with the mic and drill. But pretty soon you've got to put some constraint in. The days of just shooting layups and finishes with no constraints, it just doesn't help. So we spend a lot of time with bump pads, Swiss balls, holding them, up, all sorts of things there, and that's included in that 30% of total practice time is finishing. Because if you want to impact your shot percentage, make your layups.
Right.
That's a lot. You're going to move the 3-point shot. You're going to move that needle about 2 percentage points at best in a year. But I tell you what, you can move your total, shot percentage, 9-12% if kids make layups.
Right. Perfect. Okay. Next one. So currently in this part of the world here, we're not able to meet as a group. What would you tell a younger group to focus on or work on at home related to shooting when they're by themselves?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? And we've been trying to explore that over this terrible last 14, 15 months, haven't we? I would just talk to them about the 4 phases, and you might not use that term, but say, hey, you need to practice what you're doing with your body and your feet. You need to spend a little bit of time where you're just really focusing in on your technique. Then spend some time having some fun. Just get shots up. Just get them up. Get them up. We use that home court app, which I'm sure you guys use too. The kids love it. It's a sneaky way to get some more work into them. I think they think they're having fun, and we think they're getting better. So it's a great marriage. But you're talking about the situational too. Help put some bins out. Curl off some bins. Just explain to them your method. Now, in player speak, don't talk to them like they're a mini coach, because they're not. But just give them some tools, and they'll be into it because it actually gives them some things to do.
Coach, you, as I said at the onset here, always on the bucket list for me to tune into, and a guy who is such a great sharer and willing to give up himself and his time. And I can't thank you enough, man. I really, really appreciate this.
No problem. As I said, I know you do great work there. Huge respect for Canada basketball and everything that you do. Love to get over there once we can jump on planes again and spend some more time. But no, I appreciate the opportunity. And again, if any of your coaches want to reach out, Twitter's a great platform to reach out. I think that's one of the great sharing platforms for coaches. But certainly give them my email, whatever you need, and look forward to seeing you and your coaches soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it. Enjoy the start of your day.
All right. Thanks, mate. See you.
Take care. Thanks.